after 7.
Pushing you to the
We
front
do.
row.
We have armed support.
Okay, let's go ahead and bring the meeting to order. We've got the budget work session for November 24th. Tonight, we're going to talk about highway and airport information systems, facilities, corrections, and emergency communications. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Bob, if you want to kind of take over and lead the discussion, that'd be fine, but let's just go through the highlights of each of the areas, and we'll turn it over to the council members to ask any particular questions.
Okay.
And if you
Tell them
could,
what page you're starting on.
yeah, tell us what page you're on. So,
Page 176, the highway department starts on 175, actually, with some statistics about their performance measures, about amount of miles of roads and things like that you all can take a look at to show year-to-year comparisons from 2011 through what's projected in 2015. If you want to flip the page to go to 176, that's an overview of the revenue that comes into the highway department. Well, obviously, the largest portion of that comes from the road and bridge tax. We have assumed no change in the road and bridge tax collections aside or equal in an amount equal to what we're estimating for 2014. So there's no tax increase built into this this budget at all. There's always in the second line there's always an element of property taxes, as you guys probably know, that are delinquent. And the delinquent taxes can vary depending upon whether or not you're talking about a lot of little ones or a couple of big ones, that kind of thing. So we just generally try to track that on a trend basis. We don't have any real science to it, but that's another $1 million in the recommended budget for 2015. And that really, other than the fuel tax that you see and some federal money down in the third section under intergovernmental, the property tax is by far the lion's share of the funding that comes into the highway department. The fuel taxes, we get a payment of somewhere in the area of around $300,000 a month from the state for our share of the motor fuel taxes. Next page is in 177, just gives you a breakdown of the personnel in the highway department. So and from there we get into the different departments of the highway department, and I'll let you just take a look at those to see if you have any questions. Obviously, I don't want to be reading line by line for 50 pages of material here, but
the highlight is that there's, if I'm looking correctly, there's no more staff needed or request or
no.
proposed.
There's no staff change.
Staff
No staff changes.
is consistent. Actually, it's down one, but from 121 in last year's budget to 120 this year. So
Okay.
Craig's running pretty much a consistent operation with prior year. Revenues are expected to come in at a level equal to prior year, and we're budgeting accordingly. If you flip back to page 174, you can see an overview of the Road and Bridge Fund in total. That shows the revenue sources that we talked about under the executive recommend column. We show expenses here, and part of what we have to budget for is the 3% of revenue emergency reserve of $629,000. So under our recommended budget, we're budgeting for a fund balance of $458,000 at the end of 2015, and we're estimating $3,323,000 at the end of 2014. We leave a lot of room in our budgeted expenses, though, to budget for worst case scenario, and that's why you see it's not that we're going to spend every nickel of this and take this fund balance down. You can see some of the historical fund balances in 2012 and 2013 that are $4.5 million and $3.9 million respectively. So just again, budgeting for worst case, on revenue as well as expenses and trying to keep things conservative. And we generally have the flex in the budget if we need to, if an unexpected emergency arises. And we saw that in full force when the tornado hit in 2013. Highway Department was on the cutting edge of the work that was being done there. And the budget
Okay.
and reserves handled that.
And I might mention that FTE that Bob was referring to go from 121 to 120 actually transferred into the county counselor's office. It was the person who does all the title processing. And because the person was working full-time in the counselor's office, it was transferred there. So, and a little bit of the funding for that actually decreased because they don't need her full-time to process title, so it's being picked up from other sources if it's not actually something for highway.
Okay. Just for the few viewers that we have at home, it still amazes me that there's 780 miles of roads that those 120 people maintain.
Yeah.
It's an impressive stat just from that standpoint. Any questions from council members over the where the money's going to be spent within the highway department?
Steady Eddie going
Steady
back
Eddie,
to
about the same, yeah, staying the same. Bob, let's move forward to IS then.
Let me go to the
Okay.
airport.
Okay.
The airport's a separate
Oh, yeah,
fund.
you're right, it is.
Page 355. In the, if you want to look and see how things are at the airport, just on a 30,000-foot level, I guess that's an airport term. If you look at 2012, 2013 ending fund balance, the bottom numbers there, at 173 and 231,000. We're estimating $683,000 at the end of 14, and at the end of the executive recommended budget for 2015, we're looking at $563,000. The airport is operating very well, and it truly is an enterprise fund in all ways, shapes, and forms here. We've been the benefactors of funding for additional T-hangars, and our occupancy rate is, I think, 100%. Very little turnover, and I think there's still a waiting list at the airport for our T-hangars. Some prospects about some future expansion of a tenant that are out there, and we're still in the talking stage on that. The other flight operations that are there seem to be working well. As you're mostly aware, I think we had an issue with a tenant that was significantly behind in their rent, and they caught that up completely this year after about a 2-year campaign of taking baby steps to get to the end of the road. So
What are we doing with that gentleman who was in here last week, that Ozark Airline guy? Did you guys, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and I've had a couple of conversations with Dennis about that. Joanna, have you had any? I've talked to Dennis specifically about it, and in a nutshell, the gentleman with the C-47 initially was being accommodated by the Commemorative Air Force and on their space, and they had a deal worked out to where, and this is relayed to me from Dennis, so I take it as reliable, that they had a deal worked out with Commemorative Air Force that the space would be made available for them to utilize, provided he bought his fuel from them. And the rub came that he didn't buy any fuel. He was just parking there, and the Commemorative Air Force then asked him to leave that space.
But that was a deal with a third party. we
That was a deal with a
understand.
third party,
Not
not
with
with the
us.
county.
Okay.
So he moved down the runway with the knowledge, I presume, of our former airport director. And for the last year and a half, I think is what Dennis told me, the plane has been parked there. At the same time, since Dennis has come on, we had 2 other tenants that weren't paying rent, and those other 2 tenants Dennis has worked with to get them into rented space, as should be the case. So the only person left is this C-47. And an offer was made to the gentleman for him to pay the county $50 a month, which is a fraction of what he would pay for tie-down fees if he were a weekly tenant or a monthly tenant. So he's getting a good deal from the standpoint of what we would traditionally offer anyone who wanted tie-down services at the airport. And they have not been able to come to an agreement, and of course the gentleman was here at the last meeting to air his grievance to you. He apparently was formed at some point in time as a nonprofit organization, and when I asked Dennis, I wanted to clarify whether it was a nonprofit organization at the federal level, which would provide him tax exemption, or whether just a Missouri not-for-profit corporation that had not gotten the clearance by the IRS. But apparently he did get clearance at some point from the IRS about having tax exemption status, full tax exemption status, but that exemption status has lapsed because of his failure to file informational forms to the IRS. So his tax exempt status, though, really shouldn't be a factor in this discussion, because tax exempt organizations pay rent. If you're a tax exempt organization, you have an office, you pay a landlord usually, you pay utilities.
Does he do educational things down there? I mean,
Not
from
that
a
I'm aware
historic
of.
standpoint, or
I've never seen anybody near that plane.
No.
The whole time it's been there.
I've
does
not
it
seen-
fly?
I don't think so.
So it's more of a static display?
Yes, Dennis told me that the aircraft is not flight worthy at this time, and has
Does the
not.
county get any benefit from it at all?
Other than and it's somebody occasionally, for aesthetics, you know, you go on any Air Force base and they've got old airplanes in fighters and all that around, which are kind of cool, but they're maintained, and, you know, they're in some sort of display type of area and where you can go up and walk around and all that. I don't think we generally want the public walking around.
Didn't we have a
There.
trainer jet down there also that was a static display?
Yeah, that's
And
a Boeing. Boeing's got a bunch of different planes they put up on the pedestal and shoot radar at. But
Yeah.
another jet down
No, I
there.
thought there was one, there
There-
used to be
there
one
was
right by
one.
the,
I think that was a commemorative Air Force plane.
Yeah, the CAF
Oh.
has the Show Me V-25 that's parked there and maintained there, and they have several other vintage aircraft, I think, too, in their hangar. I wasn't aware of a fighter or anything.
But they maintain those and they pay for that.
Right, that's part of
They
their
pay for
rental
that
space that they
space.
pay us rent for each month. So, I mean, that's what I know of the situation on the tenancy dispute right now, and the rental issue that the gentleman brought forward to you at the last
Okay.
meeting.
So we're asking for him to come up with $600 a year,
Right.
and he's saying he doesn't have that, or he doesn't want to pay that.
How many other people are there that do volunteer, or whatever you want to call it? What do you call what he's doing? Is it, I mean, when he came up here, he made it sound like it's a benefit to residents of St. Charles County, but, I mean, is it? I guess you don't know, or do you know, Joe?
I don't know that there's been any real comprehensive or ongoing regular program where, other than if somebody says, hey, can I come out and see your C-47, and the guy meets them out there and walks around the plane.
Didn't he call it a museum or something? Is there something
That's
else
what he
out
was
there?
calling it.
Is there a museum? Is there other stuff
The
out there?
museum, yeah.
Ozark Airlines has got a little museum that I understand that they're donating to the county. Okay.
That's the Silver Swallows.
Yeah, that was it's all
feature.
filled, it's a little A-frame building full of historical memorabilia from Ozark Airlines.
Is this all part of that, though?
No, this is different.
No,
different.
this is
Yeah,
separate.
he's not part of
But
this.
why was he calling this the Ozark Museum? He was calling it that.
Well, Ozark, that's separately maintained, though. That's maintained by volunteers who maintain a
I know,
display.
but if they're coming out, my question is, if they come, I don't know anything about this, so if they come out to this museum, are they coming out there to look at the museum and to look at this Ozark plane?
I think it's the museum and maintaining the museum display.
The only benefit I think that plane gives the county is little kids can look across out of the deck behind the building and say, oh, look at that airplane, Daddy. Well, there's airplanes everywhere out there. The problem where it's situated at, though, you got to walk across an active taxiway to get to it.
Right.
So even if they were going to somehow incorporate that into a public attraction, it needs to be off that taxiway in a way, because it's probably never going to fly again anyway. But as far as, spending $50 a month, that thing sits on a piece of asphalt bigger than this room.
Right.
That's a bargain. I mean, the guy, he ain't gonna park anywhere else for 50
No,
bucks a month.
the $50 a month rental rate is like a fourth of the traditional
Okay.
tie-down.
Well, if it won't fly, you're not gonna park it anywhere else anyway, right?
No.
Right,
Hell, it costs them more
Take
than
it
that to
apart,
move it.
huh?
It costs them a lot more to move it, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, well, whatever.
All right.
Both the previous, I'm down there quite a bit, both the previous and the current airport director have done a lot of good things and a lot of improvements to that. And if you're gonna keep that occupancy the way it is, you've gotta invest some in it, and they've been doing a good job of that.
Yeah.
And because it's not like we're the only one in town, they can go to Creve Coeur, they can go to Spirit, they can go to other places. So if we keep it viable, we're gonna keep it full, and it's a good asset. I think you're gonna see some small businesses pop up around that sooner or later.
It's very possible, and we're working on a deal right now with another tenant that could result in another building out there, and
Well, it looks like we're building up reserves too.
Yeah.
We're taking in 1.3 and spending
Right.
750,000.
right?
So what, is the idea that is there room down there to put more T hangers?
I don't know, honestly. I haven't looked at the,
I think
At the
they
layout.
think there is some.
Is
I
there
don't
some
know
there?
the number
Yeah.
that they estimate they could put, but I know we talked about that last year, and they felt there was some.
and that usually comes into play when the state has money, aviation money through MoDOT that becomes available. That's been a large funding
You
source
just
for us.
indicated there was a waiting line for them, so
Right.
if there's a waiting line and we have excess revenues.
We would need to come up with a match, if it costs you $1 million
Right.
bucks to build another set of T-hangers, your 10% match is, I think, common for that program, that we would need $100,000 for our share of that.
Great deal for the county, though. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great deal, because 90% of the cost is getting paid by grant money, and all the revenue from the resultant leases is coming back to county airport. I mean, if you can get any more of that grant and build more of those,
Yeah.
I think the payback, I did the last one, the payback, your 10%'s paid back in like three
Yeah,
or 4 years.
just a few years.
And then ever after that, it's all,
That's why I was asking if there was still room down there to do more of them.
I think there's quite a bit of it.
And we've been fortunate too. We've actually, we've picked up some grants in prior years too for runway renovation and taxiway renovation so we don't have crumbling runways. And that was the plight of Muni Airport, was the fact that
They didn't have money
the
to
owner-
maintain them.
the owner didn't want to be receiving state funds that required a commitment for a 20-year period to keep the airport open. And because he didn't want to fund the repairs and upkeep out of his own pocket, there was
Very good.
that's why St. Charles Flying Service came to Smart Field.
Okay. Anything else on the airport? Any questions, comments?
I was gonna suggest on that, the old plane, I wonder if that guy would consider, that would be a question for Dennis, if he would consider donating that to the county, and let Dennis make an exhibit out like, for instance, in the grassy area out by one of the buildings where people could actually walk up and little kids could touch it and stuff like that. It might be a way for him to get out of that plane, and where it could be turned into an attraction for the county.
Well, that's what's kind of struck me too, was when the gentleman was here, this clearly is a passion of his, and, whether or not he can afford to maintain that passion at this point becomes a decision he would need to make. But if we, we can certainly have a discussion, and if he was willing to do so, but
Do we know, does he have a group, or is it just him, or do you know?
I think it's just him.
Okay.
I don't think there's a volunteer group, like the Silver Swallows, the old logo
Right.
of the Ozark Airlines with the swallows on the tail. That group is made up of retired Ozark Airline pilots that are still in the area here.
So this museum that you're talking about, this Ozark, do you guys got artifacts, like old stuff you're gonna put somewhere, or what are you gonna do with
It's
it?
in there right now.
It's in there.
in there now.
It's,
Is there-
the
They're
pilots
operating.
saved a bunch of stuff from Ozark Airlines and did this sort of, I don't know, you call it Quonset hut or whatever, but that's up there.
And
And
people can go in there and look at it?
Mhm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
need to get over there.
They're
Yeah.
pretty.
But this other one, it had Ozark in its name, but it has nothing to do with Ozark Airlines.
Okay.
The
completely
donation of that
different type of
museum's
plane.
all cut and dry and done, isn't it?
Okay.
I don't know if we do we own that now? I don't
I
know.
thought we passed
I don't,
ordinance.
I didn't think we owned it yet.
I didn't think we owned it yet either. I know they've met with us and it's their
Yeah.
intent, but let me go
I
back
thought we
and check.
passed an ordinance sometime back, but I can tell you, one of them came by and talked to me, and they're really excited because they've seen what the county's done with the airport, and they feel comfortable that the county will take care of what they're giving us, so.
We'll look into that.
So I think they're pretty excited about it.
Okay. Anything else on airport? Seeing none, let's move forward to IS department.
IS, page 33. The budget that you see here for IS is largely operational. On page 34 are the performance measures for the department. And you can see that things are, as you would expect in any information services department these days, the demand is increasing. It's just become a state of an fact of life of cybersecurity and everything that goes along with that, and maintaining of data that staffing has had to increase, and funding for staffing has had to increase to be competitive with the market. And you can see that on page 35 as far as the positions are concerned.
Dave, did you have a question?
The only question I have is, and maybe Bob answered a little bit of that, is that department has grown from 17 and a half to now recommending 32. What has expanded in that department?
Yeah, I was actually going to speak to that right before you asked, because it,
17 to 32.
so the IS department has turned from barely supporting us to a fully functional IS department that's actually getting things done with their departments. And Jennifer oversees them day to day. I don't know whether she wants to speak to any of that, but what you have now are representatives who work directly with departments, not all that differently than county councilors are assigned to departments, who know their department, know what the needs are. We've gone from department directors screaming continuously about how worthless the department is to department directors who are appreciative of the fact that work is getting done and their needs are being met. So yeah, it's not only increased the number of employees that we have there when we were barely functioning, but it's also increased the talent pool and the skill level of the type of people that we're hiring. And I mean, we have a really excellent director, and one of the things he takes us through as an analysis each time is, would it be cheaper to do something as a quick contract or a temporary contract? We don't need this skill set ongoing in the department, or is this something that we need in order to sustain what the collector needs or the assessor needs or whatever? So, I mean, if you need for us to do something more in-depth about what each of these folks are doing, we can prepare for next week and do that, because, I mean, this has been a total transformation of this department from virtually non-functioning to really phenomenal service and leadership in data and information systems.
I would like a little bit more information on what each of the different positions do. Again, one of the things I'd look at is what the department requested versus what was recommended in the budget, and usually there's a little discrepancy here and there, but some of these are 5 persons different between what was recommended in the budget and what it looks like they asked for. The system engineer too.
Well, they moved some of those up from system engineer
Yeah,
one.
some of that has to do with
I noticed that.
reclassification. So, you remember we processed an ordinance where we now have a series, so that when we hire somebody in, as they get their certifications, we can move them through it.
Okay.
rather than having somebody we hire in and they get certified and a month later they're getting offers from outside corporations for 10, 15, 20,000 and there's absolutely nothing, even if they want to stay with us, there's nothing we can do. So we made it a series on those. I don't know. Jennifer, is there anything you want to talk to in particular about this group?
So there's something we can do, but I mean, in terms of the efforts that, what was the project in the last one?
You know, and if you're looking specifically at the system engineer one, part of that is that series now, that rather than just having system engineer ones, they're part of a series of folks so that they can move through that. And we can give you an analysis overall. But as you can see in their 2014 appropriation, they had 31, and they're going to 32 this year. The big jump was actually in the 14 budget when we funded
6 more.
an additional project manager, a system architect, a couple of system engineers, and I don't remember what the other thing was, but there was a jump between 13 and 14.
One thing I would like to see, if we could, is this doesn't tell us anything about the software expenditures of the IT department. And I've been critical of those a little bit in the past because I think those software companies, when they have a specialized software, they really take advantage of you in terms of they charge you. If you're having more systems engineers and systems architects, I would think you may have a software cost that might actually decrease. I don't know, but is there anywhere, is that in the capital budget? Where do you put software cost at, Bob?
Those are in capital projects.
They go by every various department, like
Yeah.
what the recorder, her software gets billed there?
Right.
Excuse me. Thank you.
The software costs are in the capital budget, but outside of that architect position, which I think I had mentioned to you all at the last full council meeting, or was it the work session? That position's really focusing on the one piece of databases that we haven't really shifted externally, because we do have a lot of that, a lot of those databases that have existed for some time, and that now that we have them, you do have to maintain them. But beyond that, I don't believe we've had a growth in the engineer, a number of FTEs. We've got more of those in which they're listed out throughout the budget and available to fill from HR in terms of the position classifications. But we really only have the 2 engineer, or 3, the one being from dispatch and alarm, so that's not an ad either, of the system engineer 1s or the system engineer 2s, and then it's the text below them, and I don't believe we've had an increase in those. I don't have the budget, that page in front of me, but hopefully that's correct.
Do you want a list of the software that,
I don't know, I mean, just seeing the stuff comes through the budget, we're spending millions and millions of dollars annually on software. I mean, and, you know, I guess as a businessman that I do buy software too, we try to buy a real generic off-the-shelf software program and then tweak it with our limited skills to make it work. Where I think the county buys a lot of specialized stuff that's made for a very limited pool of customers, and I think that's what makes the cost a lot higher. So it's kind of like, you know, I don't see, they don't have any coders. I think you're buying all your software pre-made. I don't know if they're tweaking software. I'm not that technically smart to know about that, but the same token, I mean, one of the justifications I could see for spending more money on people is if you could spend less money on software, because those folks are making the software you got to do. So, I mean, it doesn't, I mean, if there's any way, maybe, I guess there's no way of knowing exactly what you're paying in software countywide, because you'd have to go in each individual department.
Yeah, you know, I guess one of the things about that, and we've had discussions about that over the years, about our reliance on outside software versus trying to develop. And in years past, in generations past, we have tried to go to an approach where we've developed software internally. But from a performance and maintenance point of view, longevity point of view, for the amount of investment that you're putting into that internally, I don't know that you're any worse off, certainly, than than buying equipment off the rack, if so to speak, and having it maintained. But, you know, part of the service that you get when you do buy specialized software is the maintenance and the support updates. So you're not having to write code. I mean, we have such a diverse field of IT needs at this point that you would need, I think, and as many people and the costs associated with those people as compared to what we're paying for in the software. And I just don't think we want to be in the software code writing business. And
That's in the continuity
The problem
too.
that we ran into with that previously was it works for a while, but then eventually you have to bring it, the next and greatest versions of whatever come out, and then you have to scrap everything, retrain everybody, and that conversion from one system to another gets very difficult because you had so many patches that were built into the old system that it's hard to upgrade to the next.
the shelf life for technology is just so short anymore that
Once you lose that continuity, if the person who was your primary on working with that particular software or a couple of people leave, and this is a high turnover group, and it's a generation that is high turnover anyway. I mean, we're very lucky to hang on to a core group of people, but a lot of these folks figure they're gonna come here for 3 or 5 years and they are gonna move on. So if you're generating your own software codes and you've got tweaks in there that you can't duplicate, you've got a massive problem on your hands. So we're far better off, I think, with most of these, with buying something where part of the contract is that we know we're gonna have the continuity with the vendor, especially for some of these highly sensitive systems like the assessor and the collector are running, and the recorder. So, and we do spend a lot of money on software. There's no doubt about it. You got to have a Microsoft Word license for every employee who's using Microsoft Word. You can't share licenses by law, and you know it's expensive.
I know, it just aggravates me because that all goes to the richest man in the world. I'm
I
sorry.
hear you.
Okay.
I would be supportive of moving over to WordPerfect.
We could ask for a grant.
They still make that, come on.
They do make that, and I still use
I
it.
use it too.
All right, any other questions in IS? All right, moving forward then to facilities.
page 38, so just flip another page off of IS and you're in facilities. Not much of a change in staffing there at all. The operating divisions of the facilities department start on page 40, which facilities maintenance for maintaining our buildings and grounds, and then building services after that. So those two.
Does this have the capital improvements on it too, or?
No, this is, capital improvements is out of capital, the capital improvement sales tax, which is Fund 301, which is further down in the budget. This is just the
That's not
general.
part- This is just for the facility staff?
Operations. Right.
It's
Yeah,
for
this is the
housekeepers,
gas and
maintenance.
electric and the,
Okay.
Right. Under facilities maintenance, you'll see the big numbers on page 40 there for gas, electric, other utilities. That's the lion's share of what you see there.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Dave.
We already have our own housekeeping staff. The question I had, there's for janitorial services, there's $40,000. Is that earmarked for something certain, or?
it's, certain of the buildings are far enough away that Mike's staff does not go to those. Instead, we have contracts for janitorial.
Dispatch.
Um,
No, it wouldn't be dispatch, not here.
no. Humane, I want to say,
Yeah,
and this,
we can find out for you. That's, yeah, it's,
One janitor.
we don't want staff driving
That's the janitorial services outside.
all over the county.
No, that's it.
I see. Oh, these are, oh, I see.
These are our in-house guys using the
Outside
outside.
services, I got you.
Where does the project manager, construction manager, where does that fall?
That's in 301, in capital projects.
That's in it, doesn't just,
I think so.
Positions in capital too, though?
It's capital
Yeah.
improvements.
So, yeah, yeah.
Why doesn't that position fall under facilities?
No, no, that's the distinction I think we want to start to make here, is that facilities needs to be involved less in construction and more in just maintaining the buildings and grounds and the repairs and maintenance, and let the construction guys be the construction guys. Mike has had to wear two hats for a while here, of being a construction guy and also overseeing janitorial, building repairs and maintenance, lawn care, you know, and all the other stuff that goes along with maintaining buildings. And it just takes Mike into an area where he's expected, by wearing those two hats, to have the expertise in construction projects, and we've seen it firsthand, and where Mike's told us, hey, you know what, I don't have the expertise in this area, and that's why with Don and his insight, we've gone to having a construction manager who will head up the construction projects and lead buildings and grounds.
But who determines the maintenance of the facilities, though? I mean, because we have a totally disconnect in this county. We've talked about that. And so if we've got 10 buildings, who's going to determine because we still don't have a 5-year plan, so who's going to determine what projects?
We do have a 5-year plan.
Well, actually, last meeting, you said you don't have it yet.
No, I said it's
On
not.
all the buildings, roofing, windows.
That's true. It's not that, we do have the start of a
We have-
ongoing maintenance plan. It's not fully fleshed out like the school district ones are, that's true. And we're working on, making sure that we're programming for roofs and for asphalt replacement and
So whose department is that going to be in?
facilities maintenance.
Okay, so facilities will determine what projects need to be done on whatever facility, as far as roofing or tuck pointing or whatever. So he'll just facilitate, he'll do the plan, and then once he puts the whatever recommended budget together, gets approved, then it's handed over to the construction manager. Is
If
that
it's a
correct?
major project. I mean, we wouldn't do that on a $15,000 or $20,000.
we wouldn't do it on a parking lot, an individual
Yeah,
parking lot.
re-asphalting, resurfacing a parking lot. We weren't thinking we would do it on things like that, like
No, I understand, I'm just asking.
the rehabilitation or the reconstruction that we need to do at the jail facility, any new construction like on the dispatch and
Humane
emergency
What about
management, the
tuck
humane
pointing of this building?
expansion.
I mean, they're doing that now, is that,
Well, we didn't have a construction manager
well,
when we
would
did
it,
this.
if we'd had a construction manager?
It would have made a lot of sense, because
Would have
it's
been under
taken
him.
Jim a lot of time. For instance, on the roof over at the re-roofing of the main administration building, at Joe's suggestion, we actually kind of hired in advance of doing the roof, a construction manager for that. And then his sole job was to oversee, that bid going out, the choice of the company, and then getting the roof on there.
And that guy would also do like the parks, so that we could,
Right, because right now we pull Rocky off of his job part-time to do that.
right.
So this person would, for instance, be able to go in, like, and maybe general a project like the house at Brahmastick, instead of appointing a general like Dunian to do all the work with all the subs?
You still have a general, but
No, I think you
you
gotta have a
have a general,
Yeah.
because he can't be the general. We all have a general, but he's in the lookout for the county's best interest, to make sure the general's doing his job.
Right, and we could have broken it into a separate part, that we didn't have to have everything under the same general,
Right,
the same general contractor.
Right, you could do-
Right, Demeen knows how to do parts of that, but they just turned it over to other people anyway.
right, we could have done roads with one and
Right.
bridges and then,
That's where
yeah,
that whole discussion started.
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
But see,
This particular position is the project delivery person. You're gonna have input from Joanne or whomever, maybe it's an airport manager or whatever, in terms of space needs and assessment needs. And you're gonna have Mike Buford chime in and say, here's what I need from a maintenance perspective. And then once all this information is gathered, the project manager or construction manager, whatever it's gonna be called, is responsible for delivering what the goals of that project are and decide whether or not there's gonna be a general contractor that's responsible for the well as in addition to the building, or if that's gonna be a separate delivery function.
So what I would like to see though, Joanna, is I would like to see the 5-year plan for our capital improvements. The forecast for what buildings need to be done, what tuck pointed projects, like for instance, the sheriff's department roof, I understand
You
that's.
want me to break that out and give you just that piece of it?
Well, it should be, you got roofs tuck pointed, because those are all big numbers. You got the family arena, you got a lot of our roofs are failed, so you gotta be talking millions of dollars worth of projects and.
Right, no, I just meant, you know, and we delivered the capital plan to you. Do you want me to break out just that part for you so you can just glance at that? Look at
The
that.
part, meaning I would like to see what all the capital improvements are for the next 5 years. I mean, everybody would probably like to see them, wouldn't you? Just so we know what we're shooting at, because you said the family arena's on there for the next couple of years. That's
But
a couple million.
It's in that capital plan that we received.
Yeah.
Is it broken out though?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where did I?
Yeah,
did I
the
see
arena
that? Where
is for
it?
sure.
yeah, we got it prior to this book.
Oh, I guess I missed it. Yeah, so there you go. I missed it.
No, I wasn't teasing you about that, but I mean, I can break out just those
Yeah,
pieces
that would be
related
good.
to,
Yeah.
I guess when I heard Joe say, well, we don't want a general, I've general buildings while I was running my business and raising a family. All your general does is line up the subs and get the project done, and you save quite a bit of money doing that. I guess that's one thing that you know, I would never go to build anything anymore without at least trying to general myself. Secondly is, like that sheriff's building, you're seeing the roofs having problems with that thing already. I really, and I don't sound like a broken record, he ain't gonna like this, but I think when you get the next bid for a major facility like that, you need to get a bid on a standing seam metal roof. You guys are in it for the long haul. Those roofs don't leak. I've got one that's 30-some years old, another one's 20 years old. You put them on, and yeah, you pay a little bit, but you're done. The rubber don't go bad, the caulking don't go bad, you're done. So just for what it's worth, in the critical buildings like the administration building, the sheriff's building, I mean, you're gonna spend a little bit more money, but most of them have a 50-year warranty and they don't leak, okay? They roll them together like a beer can on the top.
In
But-
most cases, if you build the building and you can afford to build it as a metal roof, does it. No doubt about it. It's a 50-plus year roof. It's so long as, but it costs more. The problem is though, with the sheriff's department and all these other buildings like administration and courthouse, they were built flat. There's no slope. So you gotta get the slope with the tapered insulation. By the time you build a truss system and get the wind loads right, get it engineered right, you're gonna be at $45 a square foot.
I'll tell you though,
It's cost
A
prohibitive.
good example of that, and people you know, is the Bleckley's in O'Fallon, okay? He was working on those flat roofs all the time, and he did exactly what you decided. They put a truss system up above it, and then they put a metal roof and put a slope on it. The plain old flat composite roofs, but you talk to Steve and Jim Bleckley, there ain't a composite roof in that O'Fallon Plaza, but they're all metal now.
Well, but you know, the
Yeah.
Club Fitness, I put that roof on and it hasn't leaked since I put it on.
Okay.
And that's a flat roof. So there you go. It's just cost prohibitive. It depends on
All
the
right, we'll
situation.
hold off the discussion of
that's
flat versus pitched roofs for another time.
Well,
if I might also remark too, the other thing that this split does that's good for us is as Bob was sort of talking about, is that for a long time, we've not had facilities really focused on maintaining what we have either. And so we want to return them to being able to look at maintaining
I think that's it.
and keeping up what we have.
Well, one thing that Joanne were talking, when me and Dave walked the courthouse, we spent $250,000 on this or something like that? The tuck pointed, I don't remember. How much was it?
No, it was 170, I think.
With everything?
Well, no, I mean, if it would have been another, was it 68,000? We didn't,
Yeah, it
We
was
weren't able to
around 240,
capture.
I think. I think it was around
yeah,
240
if
total.
we'd been able to afford
Right,
everything.
and so what I was just saying before the meeting, and I know Steve, you just told her this today, but I really think we should just finish it. We left stuff out because we didn't have the money. So there's like the balconies need to be restored, then the thing would be 100% restored. And we didn't do the balconies, and they're getting a lot of water penetration and stuff, and we were gonna put some coatings and do the spindles, the concrete spindles and the decorative stuff. And that's still pretty well shot. And I think there's 4 balconies, and so I really think that we should finish the building, don't you?
As a change order or rebid?
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. They bid it. We have all the bids, so we could just go back in the spring and pick the contractor who already had the lowest bid. I don't know,
I
I'm
asked
sure
Joanne
that,
about that just today.
that's what
I
she
told him
said.
that.
Oh, yeah.
We got some grant money for this phase of the project.
We did.
Is it possible to apply for another grant for the rest of
We
it?
are in the process of applying for another grant, and that's what I had explained to Joe, and
Wait and see if we get the grant money.
Good deal.
That's what we're gonna do, yeah. But I'm just saying, if we don't get the grant, it would be foolish not to finish the project.
Well, short answer is we're all in agreement, though, that the construction manager, project manager, whatever you want to call him, is a good step forward from a facility standpoint. It'll free up their time to concentrate on preserving and maintaining what we already have. And Joe, like you've pointed out, maintaining that envelope around the buildings. I think that's the critical part.
Yeah, that manager position is in 301, it's capital projects fund. In total, it's on page 322, if you want to see the details on that.
Okay. Anything else on facilities at this point? Seeing none, let's go forward to corrections.
Corrections is page 121.
Yeah. What page? I'm sorry.
121.
Thank you.
Performance measures are first. Personnel is the second page. Personnel is same.
So no change in personnel?
No. And then the actual line item budget is shown on page 124 and 125. A summary of the budget is on page 123. The budget's very consistent with the 2014 budget.
Are we still housing the federal prisoners too and getting money
Yes.
from it?
Yeah, there is
Yeah.
I thought that we had a performance measure on that. Am I mistaken about that?
Are we pretty
Yeah, I guess
full
so.
down there, Joanne?
yeah, we're pretty full up. From day to day, we're near capacity, like 95, 98%.
Are we, you talking about the corrections project, is that next year, is that what you're talking about?
In 2015, if you remember, in 2012, I think you funded the renovation of the control station and booking, but we didn't actually do it. In part because they realized it had some real repercussions for medical and some other generalized inmate areas, including the muster room that's in that floor. So what we've done is we've done an RFQ for an engineer to look at not only how we would best do those things, that renovation, but also in the meantime, we've realized we have a huge power problem in that building. There's insufficient, they've been adding stuff to it, you know, over and over and over again since we built it in '88. Nobody's ever looked at the power needs. And it's now to the point where our electrical staff is saying we really have to be cautious that we don't cause some sort of electrical failure in that building or cause a problem, because we are actually above the capacity for the power that's been pulled into the building. So that's the first thing we're going to be doing next year, assuming that you roll over and refund the project in 2015, is doing that study, getting the layout done, and then proceeding with the construction.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, since you brought that up, that we probably ought to have, electrical engineer come in and look at that system before we get too far along.
Is that what you're gonna do? You guys?
Yeah, we're going to lead the whole thing with the electrical study.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's not the only building we've got this problem in. I mean, Joe's talked about with me a number of times over the last couple of years about all the things we couldn't do in the years when the taxes were so short. And, the part of that is that, we had to do some work out at Dispatch and Alarm. We had insufficient electric out there. We've got insufficient electric at Humane, you know, at the Pet Adoption Center. So that's something we're gonna have to start keeping an eye on, is that as we add stuff that, you know, it matters to how much electric you've got pulled into the building. I mean, so, I mean, people like me were used to just, you know, you buy another one of those things that's got 6 plugs and you plug it into one. But you're really not allowed to keep doing that. So I'm learning.
I have a question for you. If I'm assuming that what I've heard, the jail's pretty close to capacity,
It is.
okay? When it hits that capacity and we have to put more people somewhere, is there a plan for that?
There is.
Okay, and, you know, if you could take the non-violent ones and send them out to O'Fallon where the land's a lot cheaper, it might be a whole lot better deal than building them downtown St. Charles.
Well, actually, the first thing we would do, Joe, is we would relocate the administrative staff. If you were ever in the jail before the current sheriff's department moved out to Sheriff Durker Court, as you walked in the front doors off of 2nd Street, to the right and the left was administrative offices. When the sheriff's office left, to the right was renovated and cells were put in there.
Okay.
First thing we're gonna need to do when we hit capacity on a regular basis is remove the administrative staff that's to the left and probably rehab that with jails. That's gonna be our first and cheapest solution to add
They could
cells.
probably go to the new real estate acquisition nearby.
Right, or, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
So there's a lot of possibilities for, you know, housing people in offices that jail
To make it
building
work
is
for a
built.
while.
Right.
Okay.
There's
And-
not just offices there, there's a gymnasium and a meeting room and quite a bit of space.
Yeah, there's a workout space back there, so there is quite a bit of space. There's 2 large meeting rooms, there's some offices, so there's some space there. The other thing that we have is work release, which was built for 70.
Yes, 70.
I think it runs at about 12.
Yeah, it's very low occupancy.
So we can also renovate that space at some point, and stay on that campus with the jail.
For a
with the
lot of
adult-
years to come.
For a lot of years.
Okay, great.
Steve had us look at that last spring, so that was one of the things he was worried about.
Okay.
At redoing the current position or at adding another facility?
No, at what would we do if we ran out of space at the jail, if we started regularly running at 99%? And, you know, we had no place to go with these inmates, what's our next solution? Because to build a jail, I think Don went through it, he'll tell you what they thought that jail was gonna cost them and what they, because he was on the county commission at the time, I think, weren't you, when they commissioned it? I know. His name, I'm sure, is on the wall down there.
No, you wouldn't let him.
Went from 13 to 20.
Plausible deniability, is that what that is? My name wasn't up on that chart, I don't know what you're talking about. County who?
Anytime you have to have a secure jail cell, you're looking at a lot of money. We added, well, you were on the council in 2000? Yes. I think
I don't
we-
remember.
I think we're back to that plausible
I think
deniability.
we ended up
Bob was on
adding.
the council in 2000.
Yeah, well,
Yes,
I
he
know
was.
you
Yeah,
were. So
well,
when Sheriff Swope demanded the jail cells in the new building, those
Yeah.
jail cells cost $1.5 million to add 5 jail
Yeah,
cells,
to have the cells in the
Oh.
building. Yeah.
which they've never used,
It was
They've never
3.
used them.
never once.
3 cells?
No, the compromise was we did 3 instead of 4.
Well, they wanted 10,
Well, whatever.
yeah. So.
All right.
So the short
Trip down
answer
memory
is,
lane.
no, we really haven't looked at,
We really don't want to have to look at building a whole new jail.
I think the bottom line is, everything else will be moved out of there for cell space before we look at moving across the street with any kind of jail cell.
Yeah.
Okay. Would that be Clark? Would
Yes,
you agree with
that's correct. I mean, long before we have to build a new jail, we're gonna have to deal with the fact that dispatch and alarm is, in fact, Jennifer's gonna be talking about the master plan tonight. Dispatch and alarm, emergency, our emergency operations center is sitting under the inmates' sewer pipes, which the inmates regularly remind them of by stuffing things into the
I remember from
pipes.
her
and-
previous presentation and all the wonderful pictures that we had.
Yes, so, okay, sorry, didn't mean to take more time.
All right, anything else on corrections?
Yeah, just to point out that, that the renovation items for the Justice Center are on page 3E, 34. If you're looking for, $594,000 is in the capital plan budget for 2015 for renovation, and $30,000 for HVAC study and outdoor recreation area. So fairly well funded at this point for some of the work that we plan to do next year.
All right. If it's all right, let's move forward to emergency communications.
That's page 339. The initial project is approaching completion. It's taken a long time to get here.
Yeah, we would probably actually be turning it on a few days after Thanksgiving, but with what's going on right now across the river, there's some last phase testing that we asked them not to do because the system's actually in use for St. Louis County right now, which I don't want to talk about too much, but they would have to disable part of the equipment to do the final testing for what they call the failovers. And they were in process of actually doing that this afternoon when we asked them to, St. Louis County asked them to stop and to put it back up. They need it right now badly. So sometime, depending upon how long they delay us, we'll be up and running. Jennifer, do you know who the first?
Either be St. Peter's or the Sheriff's Department.
And the trainer's not coming. Will that affect things?
Hopefully not. We're working on
The trainer who was on her way to do one of the final phases of training refused to get on the plane and come to St. Louis because of.
Are you serious?
Guess that tells you about the travel and tourism dollars we were expecting. Not gonna happen anytime soon.
I guess a couple of highlights, if you will, on page 341. The ongoing operation of emergency communications will be funded by the capital improvement sales tax increment that was voted on and approved by the voters in 2009, I think, that allowed us to reinstate the quarter-cent sales tax rate for capital improvements, where we had voluntarily rolled it back a few years earlier to 0.2 of a cent. So that's the sales tax revenue line that you see on page 341, and then we receive a subsidy back on the bonds. They were Build America bonds and Recovery Zone bonds that we receive a portion of the interest back, 20 and 25%. Respectively of the interest costs of those bonds in the form of a refund from the IRS after we've made the bond payment that helps subsidize the cost of the bonds. And that will run throughout the lifetime of the bonds until the bonds are paid off. The staffing is remaining the same on page 342. 343 is the personnel costs. And then on 344, bleeding over a bit into 345, are the operating costs of the department. And everything in this department is, aside from the large item that you see in the capital area there with a lot of zeros behind them, we're spending the rest of the bond proceeds and the money that the county put into this project at the front end to finish the construction costs of the project down in that capital section. You'll see we had $22 million appropriated in 2014, and most of that, because of the delays in the project, have moved our payment of the final project costs into 2015 now. Other than that, staffing has remained the same, and after the turn on of the system, we'll be getting more into a maintenance and management the system role as opposed to a construction project.
When we asked before about the debt for the radio bonds, okay, it's 24, original balance is 24, current balance as of last December was almost 22 million, payment was 1.7. In general, do you think the taxes that are going to come in from that sales tax and the other revenues are going to pay for the bond payments and the expenditures of that system?
Yeah. At some point, we may get into a situation where we have to supplement the operation of this fund with other money, but not in the near future. We initially set the feasibility of this project up to be self-funding, and there may be issues that we incur down the road. I don't know, but the original assumptions on this project were it was going to be a self-funding project based on the sales tax, and our assumptions of the rate of growth of the sales tax from year to year were assumed to be at a 2% level year to year.
But I think we need some clarification around that that's really focused on the purchase of the system. Keep in mind that we've talked a lot about subscriber fees over the last couple of years, that helping to pay for ongoing maintenance isn't paid for out of the collections from the tax or the bond proceeds.
Yeah.
That's being paid for by all of the jurisdictions helping to participate in funding of that activity.
Including us, where we've self-allocated our percentage to ourselves, and we'll pay for that.
Okay. And I guess the other question, and I think you might have, Jennifer might have answered this before, with the changes in technology, and we all know how the technology we had a few years ago is totally obsolete now. Do you think that the technology in this tower system will last for the bond payments? The bond payments going for probably 20, 25 years? 20-year bonds, were they?
There's what, 23 years left?
23 years?
They were 25-year bonds.
Issued in 10,
No, I'm sorry.
issued in
They are,
11, 12.
the bond issue was put out there in 2010. And I think it's a 20-year bond issue. Top of my head. I'll
Let
tell
me
you
answer your
20.
question about the
Yeah.
technology. Yes.
Okay.
Clearly, and Dwayne said that in the budgeting from the very beginning, at some point that our vendor will issue some new upgraded software thing, and we'll flash the whole system, and it'll work better, and that'll require some new routers or something on the ground. But the basic system is intended to last that amount of time. The next thing sort of on the horizon out there is, you may have heard it jokingly called ObamaNet. It's called FirstNet. Congress passed it a number of years ago, yes. So we are a participant in FirstNet planning, as are all our fire departments, all our police departments, all the jurisdictions here. FirstNet right now is a gleam in somebody's eye. So for the next 5 years, all they're going to do is talk about what it should be and how much it'll cost to fund it. And then they hope to then begin to have Congress funding part of it. So, but FirstNet, if you've not heard about it, is a proposal for data and then someday wideband voice. But it's not, the voice isn't hardened enough right now. And the estimate is that it's going to be 2025 before it's fully hardened and able to be funded for the voice side. Now, the technology they're hoping to begin, and there are some pilot projects out there right now. We tried to look at cobbling some money together to get in on the pilot projects. We haven't entirely given up that hope, but then again, we don't spend that much on data that we've been able to figure out yet. Some major urban areas and some very rural areas are spending a lot more on data than we are.
If let's say this increased expenditures need to be done for FirstNet 5-10 years down the road, is there a mechanism, financial mechanism within the existing structure where you can increase user fees to the people that are using it to pay for that? Because it looks to me with operation expense and bond payments, you're real tight. You know, it's pretty.
Well,
I just didn't know, is there something,
it-
Jennifer?
It would require the agreement of the cities,
Cities,
is whether or
right.
not, there are partners in that. If they don't want to go in and pay for FirstNet, then we wouldn't do that.
Okay. But I guess along with the cities agree to pay the users would agree to pay additional user fees, you'd have a
Right.
way to fund that way, right?
part of our budget does not really assume any third-party revenue at this point, because we didn't know what that number was. And as time rolls on here, there's no money budgeted in 2015 for subscriber fees to the other municipalities because we're under warranty with the radio system in 2015. And I think we ran a project our scenario ran out 22 years, I think, right? So we did a 22-year projection that has been looked at, re-looked at, and then looked at many more times. And some of the assumptions, trying to budget out 22 years is crazy, but.
Really, that's hard?
But we've tried to look at this and scrutinize this plan a lot and make sure that it's feasible, and we believe that it is. We're awaiting word right now, actually, as to the amount of third-party co-location revenue that we will be allowed to actually recognize off of the system, since the use of tax-exempt bonds and are in the mix here. There's a calculation that has to be done. It's being done right now by our outside bond counsel, looking at this, and we're awaiting that because we've received just in the last day here another inquiry from an interested party or that had been interested and may still be interested in co-locating on our towers. And I think, how many have we received? 3, 4? Yeah. Yeah. So
The other thing we'll probably be coming to with early next year is, when we initially conceived this system back in 2005, I think, was when East West Gateway first voted on that. They called it a system of systems, and while the 8 counties that are part of the East West Gateway makeup, everybody was going to have their own freestanding system, but somehow that we were going to link them together. Well, because 4 of those counties were lagging and 3 of them got funding around the same time, we've actually built St. Charles, St. Louis County, and Jeff County as a single system. And it has a doubly redundant master switch controlling it, so that if we would have a tornado near the St. Louis County facility, our equipment's online and we begin running immediately, and the users, the firefighters and the police in the field would never even know that the master switch had gone down. It would stay up automatically. If a tornado knocks a tower down or an earthquake knocks a couple of towers down, the microwave is set up to start researching ways to reconnect, to keep as much of the system up as possible. The area that it connects over is such that it throws a bigger shadow than, a bigger projected control area than they actually need for that particular tower. So in other words, we've tried to harden the system, make it as redundant as possible, and keep it working. But we've also realized that because we now really have one system, there are some things we don't need to duplicate between the 3 counties. And so we're talking about right now a plan to jointly maintain the core of that system, or jointly put out a contract for the maintenance of those master switches, which form the core of the system, rather than them trying to hire that expertise, us trying to hire that expertise, Jeff County trying to hire a contract for that expertise. So you'll
Okay.
probably see us early next year about that.
Sounds good. Anything else on emergency communications?
No, but while we're in the back of the book, I had one quick question.
Go ahead.
Under the surplus tax sale fund, where's that money go?
school districts, I think.
Oh, does it?
I think that's where it goes.
What is it?
I don't know. That's why I was asking.
What page you on?
It's on page 389.
Money received in excess of the delinquent tax sales. I think that goes to the school districts.
All right, you really were raising your head here.
Well, I will note, though, that on a delinquent tax sale, the first obligation beyond the taxes owed is to return it to the owner of the property. And it's only if they don't make that claim within, I think it's 2 years, that we can do anything with that money.
Yeah, it's quite a while to get through that process.
It's not county money.
No.
Oh.
Good, darn. Joe contacted me earlier today, Joe Brazel that is, and he's not going to be with us at the next budget workshop. So he wanted to talk about a couple things pertaining to the police body cameras, if we had time at the end of tonight's budget. And looks like we got about 15 minutes, so.
I just wanted to bring up some things. I did some little research on it, and mostly what brought it up is I never gave it a second thought, you know, with all the stuff going on in Ferguson. I understand why we would need them. I get it. But then there was a news station, there was a broadcast last week that I was watching, and some of these municipalities throughout the country are getting rid of the body cameras because what's happening is it's creating such an extra workload on Freedom of Information Acts. People, news stations, whatever, filing for Freedom of Information on all the different storages of body camera footage. So there were some scenarios I was thinking of, and you know, talking about privacy, not the police officers, but the privacy of the citizens. If you're having a party or something at your house, and you could even be an elected official, and you're having a few drinks in the confines of your own house, and your neighbor who doesn't get along with you calls the police department, and they go over to your house, and you may get agitated, and you may say some things that you probably normally wouldn't say, but you're at your house, and then the begrudged neighbor files a Freedom of Information Act and puts it on YouTube, or your daughter caught drinking and driving and gets pulled over for a DWI, and then they do the Freedom of Information Act, and then it's on YouTube. And so a lot of this stuff was going on in these other municipalities, so it creates a whole new area of problems for privacy, and I'm very concerned about it. Then you got the other issue. You have police officers, and I did talk to some of them today and asked them what their thoughts were. What about discretion? You have a police officer who pulls over a young guy, 16 or 17-year-old, and he has a little marijuana with him, but he feels like the kid's a pretty good kid, but it's on camera. There's no discretion. He can't let that guy go, or you're speeding, you're going 10 miles an hour. So you let go of the first three, and then you decide to ticket the fourth guy because he's a jerk, or give a DWI, or whatever the case may be, and then the lawyer subpoenas all the different videos, and his case is, well, why'd you let the first three? I mean, you have all this stuff on film, so you're having privacy violations here, it could be totally misused, you're having staff workloads. There's a lot of articles about that. The prosecutors are saying it's creating such a heavy workload. And then you have work ethic too. It's like, okay, so we're hiring police officers. We're hiring them based on their expertise, their training, their hopefully their moral compass, different things that they do that you hire these people for. So we're going to put cameras on them because we don't trust them, or we're trying to protect. What are we exactly trying to do? Is this a knee-jerk reaction because of what happened in Ferguson?
Sheriff asked for this a year and a half ago, too. It was in
Well, maybe
the budget a year ago.
I know, but maybe so, but this is not somewhat of a new, there's not a lot of police departments that are having it. So I'm just cautioning that I think there's going to be a lot of problems that come along with these things. And plus we're spending over $400,000 on these things. So my question is, how often, if you ask a police officer that's been on the force for 20 years, how often do you think it would have benefited you for having this camera on them? You won't get very many, I don't think it would. I mean, and so at what point are we doing it to protect the police officer, protect the citizens? What are we doing? And then are the ramifications of the privacy incidents, do those become worse than what we're trying to put the cameras on them for?
Those are all legitimate questions, and those are all the reason why, in part, the sheriff did nothing with the money that you budgeted for him a year ago. And not just those questions, but then how do you keep the cameras going? Because we have take-home cars, so his guys are out of the station, they come in 2 days a week, but the camera's gotta be switched out and charged up, and it takes the guys away from duty for a certain amount of time. But, you know, the question is, what's it being used for? And why are you using it? And, you know, what are the cost ramifications of that? And I don't think that on the privacy side yet, there's good answers to that, because some of that's just now falling out. But in terms of documenting, I think first and foremost, it's not a lack of trust in the officer, but it protects the officer in most instances. 80% from what I've read of these body camera results that they use prove the officer hasn't done what he was accused of by somebody. So, you know, they're very much a protective device when these guys are.
What about the discretion issue, though? I mean, how do you can't.
You know what? There's 30 speeders that go by the cop before one drives by him and cuts him off, and he stops that guy. I mean, an officer always has discretion. I know the sheriff's in the room right now, but I don't know that any of that changes their discretion.
But if it's being filmed, though, what I'm saying, if it's being filmed and being documented, there's going to be more concern of them making a discretionary call.
They put those things in their reports, Joe. I mean,
But that would be irrelevant in a different case. I mean, you're
Right.
suggesting a lawyer's gonna go and find out if they let somebody go the day before. What doesn't, that's irrelevant.
I've
You know,
talked
if
to a
you're-
lot of police officers that have them, that other departments use them, and I've read what I can read about it. And there's a lot of gray areas that we're gonna have to discuss, but what I read is that the police like them a lot because it protects it. They say something like 80–90% of the complaints go away when a guy goes in to make a complaint to the sheriff or police department, and he says, "Oh, wait a minute, let's pull up the video of that incident." And boom, the guy hits the door because he realized it was unsubstantiated. So I mean, there's good and bad about it, but I guess I think it's the way of the future.
Joe brought up a good question too, though, about the privacy aspect. I know some people are information hounds, or they're snoops. I mean, if there was a big party next door, they want to know really what happened there. Or I was driving down the road and I saw Joe Brazel get pulled over. Well, can anybody just go in and request the footage of that police incident? I mean, that seems.
They pretty much can. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
you can't request it, and nobody can request dash camera video. We don't produce that to anybody except under 610-100, right? It's treated the same way.
610-100.
So, I'm sorry, in the Open Meetings Act, there's a separate set of the act that has to do with criminal. So it's not like a Freedom of Information Act of, hey, I want a record just because you happen to have it, and we say, okay, well, it's gonna take us probably an hour
Why are these
insertion.
other communities having these problems, though? I mean, they're saying that they get such an overload.
Are you talking about in Missouri?
It was on, you know what, we were trying to Google it today, but I didn't know, I forgot I was gonna not be at the meeting at Monday. I didn't realize it was Monday, so I wasn't really prepared to get my information, but it might have been in Wisconsin, I'm not sure. It was different municipalities, but they're getting rid of them because there was such an overload of work. And even in Columbia, Missouri, they're talking about it. The prosecutors say that the body cameras raise enormous workloads, where it's cost $4,000 to $2,000 a year just for storage and all that other stuff.
Storage is expensive. I completely agree with you about
That's
that.
the biggest problem.
That is the biggest single problem to overcome in all this when
Here's
it
the
comes to
biggest
money.
single problem on privacy, Joe, as long as you're in public.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
What kind of expectation of privacy do you have? You say the guy that drove by and saw you, what's all you gotta do is get out his.
No, but see, and I agree with you. That's the thing is, if a police officer is going to do something that if he knows if he's a bad seed, you're going to have bad seeds. You may, out of 100, you may have one or whatever, right? In whatever profession it is. If he knows he's going to do something wrong, why wouldn't he just shut off his camera? I mean, but if he's not doing, I mean, the other side of the coin is at what point this whole camera thing, I just don't think are we going to put them on the highway department guys or anybody that interacts with the public? At what point does it stop? I mean, are there I just don't know, and the other thing is in the budget, that we don't talk about storage, we don't talk about all these other problems, that once you do something, you're doing something, and I understand the intent, and I think it's good, but I think it's not well thought out. I think there's other ramifications that come along with it that may be worse.
Well, it's gonna stop when juries quit giving people large awards for claims that they say that a government like ours, things that we did to them. And, as long as there's a possibility that we could be looking at those kinds of damages, this is just a way to protect ourselves so that we have, evidence to counter those allegations.
What do you do about the, if somebody gets pulled over, or DWI, or your daughter, your son, or something like that, and then the little
DWI
friends?
cars already have dash cameras.
Yeah.
Okay, but you said,
Yeah,
is that
for years.
protected though, or can that be
It's
freedom
under
of information?
610,
That's
100, it's
something
under the
that's closed.
criminal.
That would be closed.
Now, would the body cameras be closed too?
If it's involved with a DWI arrest or.
Is it, at what point does it become closed? I guess is my question. At what point, if somebody goes into someone's house for just a party or anything, at what point is that information public or is it private?
Well, first thing I'd tell you about that is, before I even answer what I think that answer is that I wouldn't be surprised to see the Open Meetings Act in Missouri change as these cameras are worn. I think right now, probably the answer would be dependent upon what event the officer had the camera on at. If it's something where he makes an arrest, I think it's going to fall under 610-100. If he's there on a criminal matter, it's going to fall under 610-100. If he's sitting in a restaurant and somebody just comes up to him and is stupid to him, and he says something inappropriate back, doesn't have anything to do with a crime, it's probably going to be open under the Open Meetings Act. But if the video is being taken of a criminal act or is response to a criminal act, that's going to fall under that portion of the Open Meetings Act.
I think I'm more concerned about the non-criminal, the non-criminal
Well, they
acts.
don't run continuously. They have, the way the ones that we've looked at, they have a button. Now they do, before you get to the button, and this was something that when we were talking about the versions that the sheriff has been interested in, there's like a 15-second, I think, Jennifer, that it's kind of it's on there. And so then if you decide to hit the button, it's got 15 seconds before you hit the button that it's already recorded and gone on. But if you don't hit the button, that 15-second that it's got in lead time kind of goes away.
Okay.
So.
This
I guess,
is, this
okay,
is,
this is what, I just to finish, I know that this is a lot to think about, but I think that it would be fair for us to know what your plan is to do with the storage and material, who's gonna manage these things, what kind of man hours are we talking, because this is pretty vague, the budget on here, so if it's gonna be a couple, $200,000-300,000 a year, or whatever, I don't know. To me, I don't think, I mean, it doesn't, I don't know, I think I have some privacy, I think the privacy thing is bothering me, but it's a good conversation, I don't.
Let me tell you, we've thought and talked to the sheriff about it a whole lot more this year than when you funded it last year. So we've got answers to some of those things and a couple of things we want to try and look at, but I would tell you it's not completely fleshed out at the moment.
let's go ahead and take a break and move the tables. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock at the dais.